So I would like to introduce our speakers on this panel. We'll be discussing issues around financing and enabling women to launch businesses and get into entrepreneurship in Africa. So I'll start up with one of our first panelists. She is the CEO of Africa's Talking. Please welcome Bilha Ndirangu. Up next, we have the founder of the Assembly Hub. Please welcome Yoanna Chikezie. And last but no means the least, please welcome, she's the head of startup and developers at Facebook Africa. Please welcome Kendra Nachi. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you everyone for coming. So I know quite a few of these lovely ladies with very busy schedules received last-minute messages and last-minute information about the program, so we are so happy they could all make it. Thank you so much for making the time on such a busy day. So we'll start off by getting a bit of background information. So if you could start with Bilha, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Bilha, as it's been said. CEO at Africa's Talking. So born and bred in Kenya, hence the different accent. And spent, so I was born, raised in Kenya, and then went to school in the US, studied engineering, and spent some time working in the US, but the entire time I always thought I wanted to come back to Africa and do something, just didn't know what it was. But then got a chance to come back, worked with a company called Dalberg, which was consulting company. But the whole time I always wanted to get back to my engineering and technical roots. And at some point, got in touch with some of my college friends some of my old college friends who had started Africa's Talking, and were like, okay, we have this startup that's looking to do to connect developers on the continent. Do you want to get in? And that's how I came into Africa's Talking. So Africa's Talking is we're a tech startup, been around for about 9 years, and our core mission is to help software developers build Pan-African businesses. I'm happy to talk about it later, but quite excited about seeing the impact we've been able to have in helping African developers. We're in 18 markets, and Lagos is one of our markets, so very excited about this market too.
Excellent. Thank you, Bilha.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Pepper. Was born and bred and buttered in London. I also spent some time growing up in Wales in a very small town called Barry in South Wales. So depending on which part of my family I'm with, my Welsh accent comes out, and it's so funny. But so yeah, I studied social sciences at the University of Birmingham. Then I did my master's at the London College of Fashion in strategic fashion marketing. And I've kind of always worked in fashion, whether it was styling or editorial or journalism. And I think in my early 20s, I just had this really niggling nerve to find where I'm from and know where I come from. So I started the journey to coming to Nigeria and other parts of West Africa. And yeah, I've worked in fashion here. I launched Spice TV a few years ago. I was in charge of producing content and just basically covering everything fabulous about African fashion across the continent. And that was really fun. And in 2016, I launched the Assembly Hub. And it was pretty much just to find opportunities and a platform for creatives. And it was also something that I needed as well, launching various businesses as a creative and not being able to find opportunities, not being able to find people to support in terms of the business side of things. And so the Assembly was how Assembly was birthed. And for us, it's about upskilling and upscaling creative talent and creating value for the creative economy. And I can see a few of our beneficiaries and members. So yeah, this is basically what we do. So thank you for having me.
Thanks. Hi. My name is Kendra, born and raised in Nigeria. I studied electronic engineering in the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, which essentially means I am a self-taught engineer. Um, Anybody that studied engineering in Nigeria would understand. But what that led to was I've always been passionate about computers, about machines to be precise. I'm the fourth child, and everybody above me is female. So I was the person that was the go-to fixer of everything that went wrong in the house, or breaker, depending on the case. But I like putting things together. And I learned very quickly that to do that and be Nigerian and be successful, you have to just hustle, essentially. And I was blessed in the sense that I graduated, I got a job, and started programming because where I was working, I was into hardware, and then I moved into software because where I was working, I hated the websites. And I told the CEO we needed to change the websites because I couldn't tell people I worked there, because, yeah. And he said if I didn't like it, I should go change it. And I was like, sure. And that's how I started writing code. And from there, I got a job at Microsoft. And then I learned something really quickly, is that there are millions of other young people like me who didn't know where to start. There was no access to information, no access to resources. They didn't even know what they didn't know. And so I became passionate about just bridging that gap of knowledge and information. And so I did that with Microsoft for 4.5 years. And then I kind of moved from developers to startups, because when you are a developer, that starts to realize that writing code is great, but solving problems, actually building solutions, is even better. You generally transition from being a developer to being a startup. And so supporting and empowering startups started becoming like my mission. And so I moved to Facebook, because Facebook at the time, like late 2017, they started this whole mandate of how do we support economic growth and impact in Nigeria. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I want to do that. So I moved to Facebook, and I've been there for a year and a half now, essentially running programs for startups and entrepreneurs in Nigeria.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So following off your statement about being a self-taught developer, what would you say are some of the barriers to, particularly to women in your field, entering your field?
So I'm going to answer that question in A and B, right? So there's barriers to just being Nigerian, right? There is, my friend likes to say being Nigerian is like playing live on hard mode. But the first problem you have to deal with infrastructure, right? Everything is expensive. Data is expensive, which is your access to the world. Power, access to power. I know how many people come into the hub in Yaba just for the light and internet, right? So just first of all, there's that barrier to knowledge and barrier to infrastructure. And then being female, it's even harder because there is some interesting, I want to say, cultural mentality around women in tech that makes you feel there's an assumption of incompetence. Right? So if a guy and a girl walk into a room and they both say they are Java developers, you automatically believe the guy is better. You haven't seen them write code. You haven't seen anything they've built, right? And it's a natural assumption, and it's kind of a default. So the girls generally have to do a bit more to prove skill that they have, right? When you combine that with the natural inclination to not show yourself too much because you don't want to be that girl, what happens is you have a lot of people living in the shadows, right? People that are amazing, but don't talk about it. You don't want to be the one that's overdoing, right? Because you also don't want to be that loud woman. So there's a lot of cultural, just like intonations around being a female, just to begin with, right? So it's layered. And so in my experience, what starts to happen is when you see those girls meet other girls that are doing the same thing, not necessarily successful yet, they're just doing the same thing, they're just learning as well. It's very encouraging for them because you're like, oh my God, I have so many questions I haven't been able to ask because I don't want to sound stupid, I don't want people to assume that I should already know this, I don't want anybody to laugh at me, and there's just so many things to hear, and you're like, nobody will laugh. A guy will come to you and ask, I've had guys come pitch solutions that just make no sense, because they have the confidence to come and be like, this is my idea. If you don't like it, you don't believe in my vision, right? But a girl will automatically shy away and just hide inside because she doesn't want to be, she doesn't sound wrong, right? So it's, I think before you even start to talk about, you know, common rights code, there's just the mentality gap that you need to say, like, say first, before you are a female, you're a person. You're a person with dreams, with ambitions, with skills, with flaws, with mistakes, and accept that, right? And then let's talk about what you want to do, right?
Yeah. So we've had, even, it's not exclusive to Nigeria actually, women across the world. It's known often that for job interviews, for instance, a guy will confidently say they know how to do everything on this list. Unless a woman actually knows that she knows how to do every single thing on the list, it's unlikely she will apply for that job. So it's not exclusive to us, but it's definitely something that we need to take into account and work harder towards improving in the future. So Pepper, you actually have, they both have engineering backgrounds. You have a fashion background, and you've been in fashion all your life. So the creative industry has grown significantly in Africa in the last couple of years. You started Spice Channel, for instance, and you now have a hub around creative entrepreneurs. So how difficult or easy has it been trying to do that in this environment?
Yeah, it's been quite interesting because when I started, I had a very kind of clear vision of what I wanted to achieve. And I remember, well, I was quite confident, thinking that it was such an amazing idea. You'd be stupid not to want to support me. So I would like meet VCs, events. I knew a couple of angel investors, and it was just like, they were just laughing. They were just literally laughing at, yeah, so what do you want to do? You want to support creatives, fashion entrepreneurs? Isn't it like, you know, the thing is, in Nigeria, like the typical angel investor, when you say fashion, they think about fashion as a business they set up for their wives on Follow Oshibo or Admiralty Way. And so they don't really kind of connect with all the other amazing things, creativity, the impact, the innovation, leveraging tech, and they're just looking at you. So it kind of dampened my confidence a lot because I was just thinking to myself, does this make any sense? But again, I think just because of my own personality, I just continued at it. And I think I quickly realized that for me, it wasn't really about looking for funding, first of all. It was actually building a business that made sense and being able to articulate the problem I was trying to solve. And then that's how things grew, and people started knocking and other opportunities came. So even when we like interact with creatives, we try not to kind of say, go after funding, but it's like, are you actually investment ready? Have you thought about this business? Or are you just trying to do copycat fashion? Because I see Lisa Falario doing it and I want to be like Lisa Falario. Or I see Mufa, and I want to also do Mufa, you know, because I have a sewing machine or I can sew. So we try to kind of take them away from that to actually saying, what is your USP? What's your differentiation? If you're in any of our classes, 70% are doing ready to wear. And so we have to start from the beginning, like, what was your idea? What are you solving? What's your point of differentiation? And then that's how we try to build them up that way. And then what we find is that once they're actually getting into their business, they realize that actually I'm making money, I'm making revenue. So that hunger to go for investment isn't there when you haven't really got a clue. But yeah, I think coming from a fashion perspective, especially in this terrain, it's not something that people tend to take seriously. From your parents to, you know, I'm sure you've had so many stories of trying to convince your parents that you want to be a designer or you want to be an artist, and they're just looking at you funny and like, no, I'm not going to waste my school fees on this. So yeah, I mean, that's what you said. There's also that confidence as well. And even in a classroom setting, you find that the male entrepreneurs are very vocal. They're very confident. They can say what it is they're trying to do, even if it's rubbish. And then the women are very kind of reserved, and they're just kind of waiting to speak later. Or they're very good at networking, but they won't speak up in meetings or in, you know, public gatherings. So yeah, that's the kind of things I've observed.
All right. Bilha, so Africa's Talking is now across multiple countries. So how would you say would you grow a venture-backed company to scale?
I think listening to my fellow panelists, it's quite different. I mean, I think it's very different when you're not a Silicon Valley company and then doesn't help if you're African and more so a woman. And I think we don't necessarily have the luxury that Silicon Valley companies have, where you just need to have an idea, and it doesn't have to be the smartest idea, and people will be throwing millions of dollars at you. I think it's a lot different in Kenya, or at least in Africa. And I think, which I think is actually a good thing. We do need to create, and people don't necessarily have the luxury to do it, but you do need to sort of prove your business. Unlike in Silicon Valley or some other spaces where you just have an idea and people are willing to give you seed funding. Unfortunately, here you do need to prove your business in most cases. And a lot of startups don't have, people are barely making ends meet. You're barely, paying your rent from your job, if at all you even have a job, leave alone getting started on an idea and actually, trying to run a company for a while. So, for example, at Africa's Talking, we bootstrapped the business for a couple of years before we actually got our first round of funding. It helped that my co-founders and I had been working before, so we had a bit of money, and you could put money into the business for a while. But very, very cognizant of the fact that that's not everyone's story, and not everyone has that luxury. And so I think going forward, and I think this is just my own observation, there's definitely a need for funders that understand the African setup and the African context and are willing to give startups a chance and not necessarily, benchmark them against Silicon Valley type startups. But on the flip side, I think for founders or someone who's trying to start a business, you do have to run a business that's at least try and prove the business model, because I think sometimes I do see people come on board and they want to get funding, and you haven't really thought through your business idea, and you just kind of want, oh, hey, I have this idea, please give me money, and you're not sure that it's actually going to be something that will actually generate profits, etc. And I think for African startups, I think there's a need to actually build businesses that are actually profitable, which is a bit different from Silicon Valley type places where you don't necessarily have to be profitable for years. We don't have that luxury. And I think from the word go, we need to think through, okay, the business I'm starting, can I see myself getting profitable as soon as possible? Yeah.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. So, Pepper, just from that, when you're looking at the characteristics of entrepreneurs that, for instance, come through the hub and whatnot, what impact would you say having knowledge of business models and financial literacy have on their potential to get funding for their businesses?
Yeah, it kind of changes everything around almost 360, because you're going from, I just cut, sew, and sell, or I just take photographs at weddings, and I'm fine, and I go back to my 9 to 5. But then when you've been able to kind of look through your business model and actually test my ideas in a way that can show, okay, I've got traction now, and I can actually show a potential investor or the bank manager or whoever you're looking for money, makes a huge difference. And a lot of them literally come with like zero experience or knowledge of all of these concepts that we take for granted. And to be fair, when I started, I had no idea about all of this investment talk. Seriously, I had no idea about equity and what's your, these like really very intimidating language that these investors like throw at you. So I guess I was lucky because my husband's in tech, so I kind of like listened to a lot of his phone calls, and that's how I started learning about, that was like my first like 101. And it's so funny because when he, like some of the money he's raised have come from like Bear Parlour Gist. And I'm serious, like literally from an idea, but like my husband's he's very analytical. Like he can tell you an idea from start to finish, how it's going to make money in 10 years, in 5 years. But I could never do that. I'm very much like, I'm very creative and conceptual and dreamy. So I had to learn the hard way. So I think when you're even dealing with creatives, you can't really come with them with all of that talk because it doesn't make any sense to them. They just want to understand, well, this is what I'm producing. Here's my creation. How can I make money from this? Or how can I get market access? And so we try to kind of break down those really massive concepts into things that they can understand, and then we've seen a lot of difference. Like someone came and did like a 2-week course with us. The next day she was in Denmark and she won like a global competition, and that was because she understood what it was she was trying to do, and she could understand the value, and she's just kind of spiraling out of control, all from just being able to understand pitching concepts, telling your story and trying to communicate your value. And they sound really simple, especially to like the tech guys, but to creatives, it can make a huge difference. And even the idea of like the social impact and how fashion and creative, various creative things can create jobs and all of these things that they don't think about, but they're doing it. Some, you know, they're helping rural women with coconuts and shea butter, and you know, they're employing people at mass, and it's like they don't see that as a value because they do it every day. But then being able to like show them the light that actually what you're doing is very phenomenal, and this is what here's the opportunities you can get because of what you're doing. So yeah. Sorry, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no.
Waffle.
Very critical points. Actually, one of the points that struck me was the one about beer parlor conversations, because people underestimate the social aspect of business in Nigeria. So Kendra, for instance, I imagine you work with a lot of communities, of developers and the like. So how much impact does the network have on them?
It's everything. I wouldn't even lie. So in my experience, and I was funny enough just saying this to Wale, is that you can have workshops and boot camps and labs all day, but put people in a room and say we're doing karaoke. And it just automatically changes the air. It's not, so it's two separate things. There's what my people call Imam Madu in Nigeria, where you have to know people to get things done. There's that, but that's not even what I'm talking about. Is for a huge part, when people invest in you, a lot of the times they're investing in the person as much as they're investing in your solution. So they need to know the person they're investing in, right? The same thing when you are trying to solve a problem, right? If it's a problem you connect with, it shows when you talk about it, right? And so getting to actually know the person behind the solution sometimes is as important as getting to know the solution. And a lot of times this happens in more social activities than in the more structured PowerPoint type settings. And community, for me, I think community, especially in the ecosystem that Nigeria has, where everybody is just trying to learn, everybody is trying to support everybody else, community becomes essential, because that's where I say this a lot, but you don't know what you don't know until you meet people, right? For instance, a fashion hub blew my mind because I know that there are a ton of people that have these amazing ideas, but think about fashion design as, how would I tell my mom that's what I'm going to do? I have a degree in biochemistry, right? But meeting someone like Pepper to say, wow, you've done this is validation for what I want to do. That's what community does, right? People that have done what you're trying to do, people that have crossed those blockers, you start to meet them, you start to ask questions, you learn from other people's experiences so you don't have to make the same mistakes. All of those happens in communities, events, networking, situations like this. I cannot overestimate the power of networking in this ecosystem.
Yeah. So almost everyone here has something related to a platform of sorts. So how would you say your platform affects the community of women, our ability to connect and get funding?
I mean, when I think about Africa's Strong Thing, the reason we got started was, it's a funny story, but we were actually doing a very different business. And what happened was we wanted to raise a couple of telco services. This was a couple of years ago. And we approached a local provider for the same services, and I think they quoted a couple of $1,000s. And we're sort of like, well, what do you mean? We went to the telco, and it was about $150 for the same exact service, but these people had marked it up about 10x. And we stepped back and we thought about it, and we were like, okay, any software developer that's trying to do anything similar to what we're doing is not going to raise a couple of $1,000. And of course, these people are sort of gatekeepers and preventing anyone from getting in. And so unless you're a big multinational that can afford to pay for the telco services, you're clearly out of the game. And so that's actually what got us started. And we're like, okay, can we begin to democratize access to these services so that we offer them in a very affordable manner and provide an API platform that's very easy to use and quite agnostic, and doesn't matter whether you're an engineer sitting in school just hacking your way around or you're multinational. We pretty much give you the same exact platform service. We don't have tiers on you get a special service because you're a big company and you get a smaller, or less services. And we've seen the platform grow. We have about 35,000 developers signed onto the platform, and the idea is to actually grow this to, 1 million developers on the continent. The other thing is we are trying to get across the continent because we began to realize that the same problems that are facing a developer in Nairobi are pretty much the same problems facing a dev in Lagos, in South Africa, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, etc. And so we began to expand our vision and say, okay, you know what? Let's go across the continent. Let's provide one Pan-African platform so that if you're a developer and you're sitting in Lagos and you have a great idea, well, we should make it as easy as possible for you to come to Kenya or to East Africa or West Africa. So again, when I time back to your question around how do we then help women, for me, when I look at what we've been able to do with the platform, the fact that we've kind of we sort of flattened the landscape for everyone. So at least it's one less thing that if you're a woman developer with a startup, you don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, I have to go face MTN, I have to go face a bank, I have to go face all these infrastructure providers. You just need to work with Africa's Talking, and we'll give you a fairly easy to use platform, and we're able to get you started in a couple of minutes. And I think the more we can sort of see these kinds of platforms that make it easier so that it's really all about your skills, your ideas, and you kind of have to remove this, oh my God, I need to know these big people, or I need to have this major access, or I need to have a lot of money. I think the more we can begin to see these kinds of platforms, then the barriers we're talking about of being a woman, or I don't know anyone, or I need to have been born in some kind of privilege, begin to drop away. And then ideally what begins to rise up is people's ideas, and we can begin to see the best solutions coming to the forefront rather than who's got what kind of access. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, so for the assembly, it was all about bringing a community of creatives together, and also nurturing collaboration between whoever's there. So sometimes you think that you're looking for this big shot investor, but then really what you're looking for is somebody to help you with your manufacturing so you can focus on your design. And so it's about nurturing that community and just kind of creating a platform for ideas and just deep ideas to thrive. And just as you said, it's like breaking down those barriers. For a very long time, and I think it's everywhere in the world, fashion is elitist. It's very much who you know, who you're friends with. Do you have the capital to produce a collection and go on fashion weeks and all of this stuff? But the truth is the majority of the people who are actually doing the work and who are actually making an impact do not get access to these opportunities. And from just being able to say, I got a mentor at the assembly, and I'm talking about people who are like veterans in the industry and people who have done amazing things, from the founder of Lagos Fashion Week to the Maya Tafos. Being able to like be handheld by such profiles can be a drastic transformation, and that's really what the platform is about. It's really not about us, it's about making sure that you're succeeding, we're succeeding, and we're here to help you, because there's just not enough. And even about, this idea of like women, like how many women can sit in beer parlors and like meet people, especially if you have kids or like, you're with a partner. It's like after one or two times, like, what's going on? Is this guy trying to toast you? That's the next question. So going to these kind of platforms allows you to meet with people on a very neutral basis. And those people are happy to be there, happy to answer the questions, whether it's like we've had people like, who can I think of? Like so many people. But anyway, you get my point. Whether it's like the CEO of Paystack, or whether it's Piggy Vest, or any of these people who have done it and had worn the T-shirt, they can literally share their knowledge and experience in a way that you wouldn't get if you're reading an article, for instance, if you're trying to like DM them on Instagram. So.
So it's kind of like what Peppa said. So one of my hats at Facebook is managing the hub in Yaba, NG Hub, which is essentially a community space for startups, developers, entrepreneurs, small businesses to receive training, community, mentorship, and in some cases funding for what they do. So we partner with people that are trying to enable businesses, but sometimes specifically women. As an example, one of the programs we run at the Hub is Digital Amazons. It's a 3-week program for young girls to get into the digital marketing. And so it teaches them everything from video editing, photography, actual people skills. So they go out and they have actual projects where they go to companies and they're like your digital marketing client for a week, and they have to come up with a brand and everything. And it's beautiful to watch because you see some people start the program and they're timid and they're shy and they don't know how to express themselves. But at the end of 3 weeks, same people just like championing their brand, talking about what they've learned. And it's always so heartwarming because at the end of what our job is to give you the tools that you will need to succeed. One, give you the right network. So there's mentorship, peer-to-peer mentorship, but there's also, you get to be in the same community as people like Damilola Tedi, who, former CEO of Go My Way, current director at CC Hub. And you can actually just ask questions. How did you do this? How did you get here? And get like one-to-one mentorship based on the program that you're in. And then in certain, so like we run an accelerator program for people that are doing things specifically with deep tech, like artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And we give those guys funding to say, okay, we know generally just across the region, there's the notion that Africans can't innovate around technology, and we're trying to just squash that. So you get funding to build your product and mentorship to scale that product in the market. So a number of different programs run at the Hub targeting different areas around digital literacy and just and entrepreneurship. So yeah.
Excellent. So even though, like we discussed, there are a lot more women in technology now, a lot more women in entrepreneurship. Actually, a lot of Nigerian women have been in entrepreneurship for years. One business in one way, shape, or form. But would you say that in Nigeria and Africa in general, that there are enough women in entrepreneurship? Do we still have a long way to go? What's holding us back, if so?
That's a tricky question. What is enough? Right? So statistically, there are more women in entrepreneurship than men in Nigeria, right? Just if you look at entrepreneurship across the board, right? But then when you start to look at specialized type of careers, then those numbers start to drop. And the more spotlight a career requires, the more those numbers drop. I would say just own it. Own your accomplishments, own the thing, your dream, right? And I think that's the key differentiation, is just to be able to say, listen, I'm going to do this. I will fail. Okay, sure. Right? But I am going to do this. And just owning that and trusting that you have the right network of people around you to support you, right? And being so completely obsessed with the problem that you're trying to solve that something as small as people might laugh at me isn't enough to stop you, right? And just keep pushing, really. Because on the flip side, there is so much talk about diversity and supporting women and people of color around the world that investors are starting to do research and notice that actually women-led businesses are doing a lot better than men-led businesses, right? And this is not one, not two, not three different sources of research are giving the same results. So investors are starting to wonder, okay, so what exactly is going on with women, right? So this is actually the time for people to start buckling down and saying, I'm going to run this business, I'm going to do this, right? So just start, really just start.
And Pepper, do you have any comments with regard to that?
So I'm a consultant for ITC, and so every few months we train about 50 different women, whether in textiles and apparel or agri. I just came from there today, and we had like 57 women in the room, and they're all like killing it in their businesses, but they just don't have the structure. They're not doing the right kind of accounting. They're not doing things that would make their business look interesting for a potential investor or a bank loan. So it's not that they aren't enough. They're everywhere. They are aggressive. They're passionate. They're ambitious. But actually, they're ambitious, but they don't feel what they're doing is great or important, because it's like business as usual for them. It's just what I do. I have to feed my family and I support my family with this hustle. So I think it's just about getting more and more women investment ready and really kind of breaking down those really huge concepts. So the same way, you know, there's like a gender lens, how we interact with women, how we help women. It needs to also apply to like also the creative industries as well. Like it has to be a lens. It's not one size fits all in order for us to make the kind of impact quicker.
So going back to, like, we're in a new era now, there's a lot more interest in women, in African women, what we're doing around business, around technology. How would you say that has affected the entry of people into your own field?
I mean, when I think about technology and I think in terms of women, it's interesting because you do see, at least if they do studies and they notice, what's interesting is when people are in college, it's a fairly 50-50, entry into STEM courses. And then what's interesting is maybe junior developers, you'll probably see almost 50-50 split. But then what happens is, as you start to look at the trajectory, look at senior developers in most companies, you're literally not seeing a woman, leave alone now starting to get into leadership and actually starting or running companies. And I think there's something to be said for what's actually preventing that upward mobility. But then it does help, I think, sometimes to begin to see women doing stuff, or at least the conversations around the gender lens, and should we trying to give a lot more funding to women, etc. So, I mean, yeah, we're beginning to see a few more women coming into the space, but I guess not enough. And for me, I think it's still a question mark as to where we don't see women rising to the top in this sorts of environment. But I guess as women leaders, maybe, at least for me, one of the things I think is imperative upon me is to kind of always question the reason why wasn't a woman promoted, or why wasn't a woman given the job, etc. And so, at least in every single role I've ever had, and I've had a chance whether be sitting in an interview panel, etc. It's not about favoring the women, because I think that's not a good thing. I mean, I wouldn't want it to be that you got the job because you're a woman. Even I don't want to run a company where you're giving people jobs because of a gender. I mean, I want to have the best people, playing the, solving whatever roles we need to filling whatever roles we need filled. But I think, as my fellow panelists have said, there'll always be these sort of biases where a woman might not think they're good enough, so they won't speak out. And so I think it's imperative on you as a person on the other side to pick up on those nuances. So when you see I've been in situations when I've seen a really good CV and I could tell this is a really smart woman. She came for the interview and was really shy, so everyone was about to, kick her out. But I remember just saying, no, I think let's give her a chance, and ended up being one of the best candidates. And this was in a previous organization, and she's still there. And so I think just being a little bit more tuned to the fact that, there are all these biases against women, and women themselves also don't have the confidence in most cases. So if you're the person sitting on the other side of the table, can you begin to make the fight for it? But you're fighting for the right women, and still encouraging the women to get the skill sets. Let it be that it's your skills that are speaking for you. We're still a long way to go, I think, before we can actually begin to see an equal playing field. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bilha. All right, thank you so much to our panel. We'll take questions now. If you have any questions, kindly raise your hand so that we can get the conversation going. So I like her last point a lot, because I had a boss, one of my former employers, when I was pretty early in my career. And he always made a point, because I was the youngest person on the leadership team at the time, to point me out to say, okay, Isioma, do you have an opinion? Do you have something to say? Because if you're in a room with 10 guys who have at least 10 or more years experience than you, your first thought is, okay, I don't know enough. Let me not say anything. But he made a point to get my voice, have my voice, my seat at the table. So it was great. And after a while, I had more confidence to start, projecting my own opinions, even before he said anything. So I think it's a great thing to have bosses who support you in your environment, which is great. So any questions from the audience? Okay, we have a question there. There are no questions. Then we'll move to the second panel. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, our panels. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.